Bammy is one of Jamaica's oldest and most traditional foods, made from the native cassava root. It's a side dish with an amazing range of textures from crispy to chewy or soft depending on how you make it. Growing up, my folks used to plant cassava and I love when my mom used to make bammy. But now I have a whole new appreciation for this incredible food. Hey, I'm Nick and today we're diving into bammy, what it is, how to make it and the best ways to enjoy this ancient flatbread. Plus, I'll share a bit about cassava's background too. If you're just here for the recipe, you can skip ahead with the timestamps below. Now, let's dive in. Bammy is made from cassava, also known as yuca. This is a plant with ancient roots that originated in South America but has now spread across tropical regions worldwide. Cassava is truly fascinating because it's not just a food source, it's a resilient plant with uses that go way beyond the dinner table. In some parts of the world, even the bitter leaves are cooked and used in soups and stews. But today we're focusing on the real highlight, the starchy root that stores all that plant's energy, perfect for making bammy. Cassava tubers take about 8 months to a year to mature, but the plant itself is impressively drought resistant and grows well in poor soils. Historically, many farmers have relied on cassava because it's low maintenance and dependable, making it a vital crop in challenging climates. Cassava falls into two main types, bitter and sweet. The difference is mostly in their taste, but we'll get more into that later. Harvesting cassava is straightforward, you just pull it from the ground. Sounds simple, but depending on the soil, it can take a bit of effort. Cassava can grow from seed, but it's not the best method. The seeds don't always sprout, and when they do, the new plants can turn out very different from the parent plant. A better way to grow cassava is to plant cuttings from the old plant. This method is much more reliable and eventually it grows into a whole new cassava plant with its own tubers. As I mentioned, cassava falls into two main types, bitter and sweet. You usually can't tell them apart just by looking, but this one here is a sweet cassava. All cassava contains natural toxins, but the main difference is that bitter cassava has much higher levels of them. That might sound a bit alarming, but cooking safely breaks down these compounds, so it's perfectly safe to eat once prepared. Just don't eat it raw. This sweet cassava can be peeled and cooked as is, giving you a tasty, slightly sweet side dish. Bitter cassava, on the other hand, is often more heavily processed to make use of its byproducts rather than eaten on its own. The skin of cassava has most of the toxins, so we need to remove it completely. Fresh cassava is usually easy to peel because the skin separates cleanly from the tuber. If you leave it out too long though, the skin becomes brittle and harder to peel. With fresh cassava, you can often get the skin off in one go, but I kept these in the fridge for a couple of days so they might be trickier. Speaking of storage, cassava is surprisingly perishable. Unlike some tubers that can last months or even up to a year, cassava starts spoiling just a few days after being pulled from the ground. Refrigeration helps a bit, but they still go bad quickly. If cassava matures too long, it can turn woody. Like this one here. It becomes fibrous and even gets a bit more bitter as it ages. Even the sweet varieties. I won't be using that one. Sometimes the core of the cassava can also be woody and fibrous, so I'll just remove that as well. The Tainos, Jamaica's indigenous people, were the first to figure out how to prepare cassava safely. Traditionally, cassava was grated to get a fine pulp, which was then strained to remove the bitter starchy water. The pulp was dried to produce cassava flour, which was then used to make a flatbread, the same one we still call bammy today. After Africans arrived on the island, many of these techniques were passed down and we still prepare it in much the same ways today. But let's be real, grating cassava the traditional way takes time, so today we're speeding things up with a blender. I'm going to chop the cassava into smaller pieces to make it easier for the blender to handle. If you're using a food processor or blender, adding a splash of water can help, but it's not necessary if you're grating the cassava. The goal is to get a smooth, consistent paste without any big chunks. Blending in smaller batches makes this easier and helps keep the texture even. Straining the cassava is really simple and straightforward. What you will need is a bowl to hold the starchy water, a strainer to keep the pulp above the water, some breathable food safe cloth like a muslin or cheesecloth. Now just pour some of that cassava paste into the cloth. The strainer helps keep everything together but don't overfill it. Next, gather the sides of the cloth, twist and squeeze to remove the water. As I mentioned earlier, cassava contains some toxins. As long as it's cooked, it's safe to eat, and squeezing out the water reduces the concentration of those compounds. Once most of the water is gone, the paste should be crumbly like this. We still need a bit of water in there to make it pliable for shaping. Before we bake the cassava, let's talk about that starchy water. If you let it sit for a while, the denser starch molecules will sink to the bottom. To collect the tapioca starch, simply pour off the water. The starch holds together really well. This stuff right here has a crazy amount of culinary and industrial uses. Traditionally, people use it to starch clothes while ironing, but it's also used in cosmetics like skincare and hair care products, as well as pharmaceuticals and even biodegradable plastics. It's flavorless, odorless and translucent, which makes it perfect for food production. You can even dehydrate it to get a fine powder for long-term storage. This starch is seriously versatile. In Jamaica, many of our most beloved foods reflect influences from different cultures. Take Jamaican patties for example. They're uniquely Jamaican, but their roots trace back to British pastries, Chinese seasonings, and Indian curry spices. Jamaica is a true melting pot, and that's heavily reflected in our cuisine. Bammy, however, stands out as one of the few truly authentic Jamaican foods. It's been around since the island's first inhabitants, the Taino people, who developed it as a staple made from cassava. While commercial Bammy is readily available in local supermarkets, it's a very different product from the homemade version. Commercial Bammy is made to have a long shelf life, so it's much drier and usually needs to be rehydrated before or during cooking. Bammy is very simple, needing only a bit of salt, and even that is optional. But I'm going to show you how my grandparents made it. And that means adding coconut. No, adding coconut to Bammy is probably not the best idea if you want it to last long term. You will never find coconut in store-bought Bammy because it shortens the shelf life significantly. With fresh homemade Bammy dough, this is the most delicious thing. I'm just grating and adding a bit to the cassava. It adds some varied texture and that sweet nutty flavor. Next, season with salt to taste. Finally, mix until everything is evenly distributed. I like to rub between my palms to get rid of any lumps. Some people even add back some of that starch from earlier into the cassava mixture. I'm not going to do that today, but it's good to know that that's an option. And that's it for prep. For baking Bammy, you'll need a heavy bottom pan. I let it get really hot before adding the cassava mixture. I'm just eyeballing the amount here, but you could wait out for consistency. I like my Bammy on the thinner side, but you can definitely make it thicker if you prefer. I'm using a spatula to flatten it out. It starts off a bit crumbly but sets really quickly as it cooks. I'm giving it about 4 minutes on each side since mine are thin. You can see parts of it becoming a bit translucent. That means it's cooked on the other side. With thicker Bammy dough, you might not see that. Once it sets, it's easy to flip. This is kind of how commercial Bammy is made. They're baked lightly, much lighter than this, and then dehydrated for the longest shelf life. The size and shape of your pot will influence the shape of the Bammy, so feel free to play around with it. I've even used ring molds in a large pot to get the size and shape I want. And that's our Bammy. Growing up, my mom used to give me this piping hot with sugar. The cassava, coconut and brown sugar is a solid combo. This is so delicious and I love the bit of crunch that it has. But this is slightly bitter. I think that's because I used cassava that was a bit too old. Luckily, we have a few solutions for that. Frying Bammy is a great way to change its texture and flavor. It also has the added benefit of neutralizing any bitter taste from cassava. In fact, commercially produced Bammy is sometimes made from bitter varieties of cassava. The extra dehydrating and cooking removes that bitter taste. Before we fry Bammy, we have to soak it first. This works for the supermarket Bammy as well. In a bowl, start with 2 cups of coconut milk. Whole milk or a combination of both milks will still work. Add a pinch each of powdered cinnamon and freshly grated nutmeg for a subtle flavor. A little brown sugar is optional, but it plays up the sweetness of the cassava. Next, give that a mix. Normally you would add salt, but my homemade Bammy already have salt, so I'm skipping it. Once that's done, I'm going to slice the Bammy. No rules here, cut it however you like. I prefer quarters, so that's what I'm going with. Simply soak a few pieces in the coconut milk mixture. Just be careful not to over soak, especially with drier Bammies, as they might start to fall apart. It doesn't really take long for the Bammy to absorb the liquid, just about a minute. Once soaked, all that's left is to fry these on medium-high heat. Thin Bammy will come out mostly crispy when fried, while thicker pieces will be chewier, so you can play around with the texture. As soon as these are golden brown, we can remove them. Fried Bammy goes perfectly with almost any type of seafood cooked in any style. Escovitch Fish is probably the most popular pairing. These are some kingfish steaks, and I'll link a recipe for Escovitch Fish below if you're interested. The crispy texture of that Bammy works great with the fish and all the veggies. Plus the sweet, rich, nutty flavor of the cassava and coconut complements the tangy, spicy Escovitch Fish really well. Now, that is one amazing bite. The slight bitter taste is now completely gone, leaving a deliciously crispy side dish. This is probably why fried Bammy is the most common way you'll find Bammy being served in Jamaica. But what if you're not into crispy? Well, then this next technique is for you. For saucy dishes like seafood curries or this steamed lionfish I'm making, you can add Bammy to the pot to steam along with everything else. You don't have to steam Bammy with fish. You could simply steam it by itself for a delicious side. It's very similar to how you make Jamaican steamed fish, except without the fish. I will also leave a recipe for steamed fish in the description in case you want to make it. The Bammy soaks up some of that sauce, taking on a rich gummy texture. This pairs perfectly with fish and other seafood. And again, not one hint of any bitter taste, only that sweet nutty coconut flavor with all the richness of the steamed fish. Put a piece of lionfish on that and it's the perfect bite. These two dishes only just start to show the versatility of Bammy, which also shows how versatile cassava can be. We covered how to make Bammy from scratch and how to further cook it for a wide range of palates. If you learned something new about Bammy or have your own twist, let me know down in the comments. Big shout out to all the patrons and new subbies. Welcome to the squad. This was delicious, but I think you should check out this next tasty video right here. Catch you in the next one.